Friends, Iran's football team may have lost in the FIFA World Cup, but I'm going to bring you a couple of predictions in this video which show that Iran is winning the overall battle with the US, the Gulf countries, and Israel. This comes with a caveat which I'll provide at the end. My first prediction is that the GCC countries will seek their own independent and individual peace with Iran. That is, they will not depend on the US to negotiate terms for them, because they've seen both the ineffectiveness of the US in preventing major war and attacks on them, but they have also seen that the US priority is its own security, the security of its troops, and the security of Israel. That is, most of their efforts, their warships, their missile defense systems, their carriers, etc., were engaged in either protecting Israel itself or American bases in the region. The Gulf countries were just an afterthought. In fact, the whole war was begun for US and Israeli interests. Some would even claim only for Israeli interests. And because Iran has shown how important Hormuz is and how total Iran's control over Hormuz is, and because all the Gulf countries are so dependent on that strait for their economies, for their societies, because if they are not able to earn through exports through that strait, chiefly of oil and petrochemical products, fertilizers, etc., then the GCC country governments will be forced to tax their citizens, which will break the social compact that they have with their citizens. The social compact being that we will not tax you, in fact, we will subsidize you heavily. Don't ask for political rights, political freedom. Don't ask for how your money is spent. By your money, I mean the nation's oil income, etc. And so each of them individually is going to make a deal with Iran. Some of them might do it in small groups also of 2 or 3. It's unlikely that all of them will come together to make a deal on Iran because they have wide differences among themselves. And yes, even the UAE is going to make a deal, because despite all the brave talk of fighting back and of finding alternate routes to Hormuz and shipping their products to Fujairah, etc., they are highly dependent on peace with Iran. First of all, Fujairah is also at the mouth of the Gulf and can easily be hit as it was during this conflict. But secondly, and more importantly, UAE's economy to a large extent depends on it being a residential real estate zone, it being a big tourist magnet, and it being a logistics hub where ships come in with huge numbers of imports, which are then redistributed in the Middle East, in the Gulf, in Africa, etc. So they are most likely to make deals with Iran, either unfreezing its assets or paying it recompensation for rebuilding, and possibly even limiting US bases on their soil. My second prediction is that the United States is done with Middle East wars, at least for a while. You can see this in the change of tone, not just in Trump, not just in J.D. Vance, but in that of Republican senators, congressmen, etc. That is, Iran, which was supposed to be an existential threat to the US, part of the axis of evil. You remember George Bush's speech in 2003, irrational, fanatic, lunatic country, hell-bent on attacking and nuking Israel, US, and the rest of the Middle East. Well, now the rhetoric is very different. Both Trump and J.D. Vance and the Republican senators and congressmen who are not of the hard right are all claiming that Iran is a pragmatic country. You can deal with them. There's also a grudging respect for Iran because it has withstood weeks of bombardment. They have also seen the power that Iran has in the international energy markets, the way it shot up the price of oil, diesel, gas, fertilizers, aluminium, etc. But most importantly, there is now anger towards Israel, that Israel pushed America into this war, that this war only served Israel's interests, and that Israel has too much influence on America and American politics. But the most worrisome thing for Israel would be that it's losing support even within the Republican Party. That is, polling is showing that 53% of Americans feel that US is too supportive of Israel, and almost the same 53-54% are against this war with Iran. So the vast majority of Democrats have now become against this war. We know that. That's about 80%. But overall, 60% of Americans have a negative view of Israel and of Netanyahu also. In fact, even within the Republican Party, when those below the age of 45 are polled, and according to some, even those under the age of 50, a majority, that's about 52%, have a negative view of Israel. Of course, the older Republicans are still quite in favor of Israel. And as recently we have seen in the Democratic primaries in New York, 3 candidates who are anti-Israel and pro-Palestine, 2 of whom believe that Israel is an apartheid state and is committing genocide, and 1 of whom is against Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state. Now, these 3 have just won the primaries of the Democrat Party. They have not yet won the elections. So we have to still wait for the November 7th elections. The tide seems to be turning. 52 to 53% of Americans feel that the Israel-Hamas conflict is an important factor in their lives. This was not seen earlier. And over 40% of Americans, almost 43% of Americans, sympathize with Palestine, only 36% with Israel. And a majority of Democrats, that's I think a 53% or so of Democrats, say that they will vote against a candidate who has taken money from APEC. APEC being the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee, a big Jewish lobby group in the US, pro-Israel lobby group. Of course, this doesn't mean that there will be immediate changes in American policies unless the Democrats win heavy in both the lower and upper houses of America's parliament in November, and this momentum of anger against Israel and pro-Palestine behavior moves into the presidential elections, that is the presidential primaries that will start in 2028. But the peak of American-Israeli relationship may well be behind us because the costs that the US has borne for unmitigated, unconditional support to Israel in weapons, troops, diplomacy, that is vetoes in the UN, etc., political support, has now had costs for the US which are now apparent to the American voting public. Now, for all of these 3 predictions, that is GCC countries making deals with Iran, the US being done with Middle East wars and possibly even reducing its bases in the Gulf, and third, that the American-Israeli relationship has peaked and now will be on the downswing. For all of them, Iran has to survive. That is, the Iranian government has to survive. And secondly, it has to continue maintaining control of the Strait of Hormuz. So before I end, I request you again to please like, subscribe my channel. I don't have enough subscribers. Making these videos costs a lot of money, time and effort. So please help me by liking and sharing my content with people in your social groups. And until next time, au revoir.